Hi, this is Charles with Your Annuity Master, and welcome to today's webinar. If you're watching this online through our on-demand services, and obviously this is a pre-recorded version, so you're not going to be able to interact directly with us in real time as we go through this particular webinar. But if you have questions, feel free to hit the chat to the right or hit the contact button at the top of the site and throw a question at us, and we will get back to you just as soon as we can. Today is about Social Security and your retirement, your dependency on Social Security, how much we can depend on it, where it stands, the changes it's been through since 1935 when it was first started, and really kind of what the future looks like and how you need to proactively prepare yourself for what could happen down the road. Okay, because here's the case. Okay, you have really spent most of your life risking and accumulating money, trying to save through a pension plan, trying to save through a company-sponsored retirement program, trying to save through individual retirement accounts that you may have set up for yourself. And in addition to that, you've been contributing to Social Security for decades. Okay, decades you've been contributing to it, so you're looking forward to one day beginning to withdraw some money from that. But probably one of the more frustrating parts is that a lot of us have struggled to save outside of Social Security. Social Security is really taken out as a tax. We don't have a choice. We have to pay into it, and it's taken out of our checks before we even get those checks. If you're self-employed, we pay a double rate for that, and because we are paying both the employee side and the employer side of it. Because remember, Social Security taxes are paid one half by the employee and paid one half by the employer. Okay, so if you're not aware of that, or if you've forgotten that, that is true. So for those who are self-employed, we are paying both sides of that. And financially it can hurt, and it can cause us to struggle to save outside of our normal pay. Because we all realize that the return on Social Security is minimal. We will really never get back from it what we put into it over all the years of working. Okay, and we're all concerned about Social Security long term. We hear a lot of stories about it. We hear politicians talking about it, the lockbox, as Al Gore used to refer to it a long time ago. But what has happened to the Social Security Trust Fund? We're going to cover that as we go through this webinar. So let's take a brief historical tour of Social Security, okay? It was started in 1935 during the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. It was a follow-up to the Great Depression, and it was the government's way of kind of stepping out and saying, hey, we've got your back, okay? The Depression era was a very, very, very tough time for people, and it made Americans very suspicious of financial institutions at the time. So the government stepped in, they set this retirement program up, and they initially set it up to draw benefits starting at age 65. Okay, so when this first came out in 1935, the government said, okay, we are going to start paying people when they turn 65. We are going to begin paying them some retirement. Okay, now at the time, obviously it wasn't a lot of money, but the cost of living back then wasn't that much either. But here's the thing, is Social Security was not meant to be people's entire retirement. It was strictly meant to be a complement to the money that people had already saved in their life. But here's kind of the catch, and this is really kind of a point that frustrates a lot of people when I show them this, okay? In 1935, you could not draw benefits until age 65. Well, today we don't really think about that because we're living a long time today. But in 1935, the average lifespan of a male was only 58 years old. And the average lifespan of a female was only 62. But you had to wait till age 65 to be able to draw benefits on Social Security. So what do these facts tell us? Well, it tells us exactly what a lot of us think about Social Security now, which was the government was betting that most people would never live long enough to ever access the benefits of Social Security. That's what they were betting. Well, little did they know what was going to happen, what would be happening by 2020. Okay? Because let's take a look at how long we live today, okay? If you're 65 today, that's today, okay? The probability of you living to 75, it's nearly 100%, okay? If you're 65 years old today, the chances of you making it another 10 years are nearly 100%. It's somewhere up around 97%. So 90% of the people who the government didn't think would ever make it to age 65 are now exceeding the age 65 by 10 years. Now your probability of making it to age 80 is around 83%. So that group of people that the government thought in 1935 would never make it to age 65, well, 83% of them are now moving on to the age of 80, 15 years beyond what the government initially set as a withdrawal age for Social Security. And on down the line, making it to age to age 85 is a near 75% chance. Look at this one, making it to age 90. That's a decade short of 100 years old. If you're 65 today, the chances of making it to age 90 is nearly 50%. So it's exactly about 47%. So about half the people today who are 65 will make it to age 90. Okay, that is now 25 years beyond what the government projected in 1935. Okay, so you can see that this was really kind of structured to fail from the beginning. Okay, one last one, age 95 starts to drop off, but you still got almost a quarter of the people who are 65 today will make it to age 95. Okay, let's take a look at the timetable of changes to Social Security, because no sooner did Social Security get off the ground that the government quickly realized that they had miscalculated a whole lot of things. Okay, so let's take a look at kind of how those changes have come about through the years. Well, in 1940, the first monthly income payment was made to the first Social Security recipient in the amount of $22.54. Okay, so that was the first payment ever made. In 1950, they realized that it wasn't paying out enough to offset how the cost of living had increased between 1935 and 1950. So there was a cost of living adjustment made, which increased payments by 77%. But you realize that they were still collecting the same percentage of tax and in 1950 that they were in 1935. So they implemented a cost of living adjustment that they really didn't have the ability to pay for it. Okay, and then in 1960 they expanded Social Security to include disability payments to people of any age. Okay, so that's called SSDI, Social Security Disability Income. Okay, so once again, first they go out and they increase the payments for cost of living adjustments by 77%. Then they expand the coverage of Social Security, yet they're not collecting any additional money. So already they're dissipating that money more rapidly than it's coming in. In 1983, it became very critical. And I mean, look at 1983, that's a long time ago. The Alan Greenspan Commission met regarding the financial instability of Social Security. We're in 2020. In 1983, they were already addressing these issues. So at that time, the retirement age was expanded to 66 and 67, so another 2 years out, and the payroll taxes increased to 14% combined, meaning employee pays 7, employer pays 7. Okay, but that still wasn't enough to offset all the promises the government had made, because, I mean, think about what politicians do. Politicians run on re-election. They always run on re-elections, and they're always running trying to convince people what they are going to give them, what they are going to do for them, but they very seldom ever have plans or workable plans that will actually give the people what they always tell them they're going to give them. Okay, now in 1990 there was yet another change. Social Security tax increased this time to 15.3%. Okay, 12.4% for the self-employed. You remember I told you that in self-employed situations, the owner of the business has to pay both sides of it. Okay, and then in 1993, the taxes paid on Social Security increased from 50% to 85%, meaning initially you were only taxed on about 50% of that income. Now you're being taxed on about 85% of that income, which really kind of throws another cog in the wheel, because people are wondering, okay, why am I being forced to pay taxes on a tax? Why am I being double taxed now? Social Security is a tax. Now I have to pay taxes on that tax when I start to collect it. So you can see that this has really been a mess since the very beginning, when the government bet back in 1935 that most people would never live long enough to see those benefits of Social Security. Now, in 2020, here's the important part. Social Security trustees project that the combined trust funds will be exhausted by 2035. Okay? But so why is it failing? Well, it's really kind of easy to see why it's failing, because it wasn't put together properly from the beginning. From the beginning, the system was put together. It was put together to fail from the beginning, okay? Because they didn't estimate the ages correctly. They didn't estimate how the payments would be made. They didn't invest the investment. They didn't properly calculate the investment accounts. They didn't realize that life expectancy was going to increase. And in addition to that, Congress has been borrowing funds to offset budget shortfalls for 30 or 40 years now, because they say there's a trust fund for Social Security, but there really isn't. Apparently the money for Social Security really just goes into the general fund, and Congress is able to spend that money as they please. Okay. The other thing here is there's less than a 1% earned interest rate, because the money is invested into the government's own bonds. The money is invested into the government's own bonds, okay? Means you're basically investing in a system of taxation. That's really what you're investing in with Social Security, okay? Another reason it's failing is because the number of people receiving benefits today outnumber the number of people paying into the system. Okay, so we have a generation behind us that is paying for the generation ahead of them to have Social Security, but the people receiving those benefits outnumber the people who are making the payments. So you can see it's just continuing to get farther and farther and farther behind. Now, big problem here, and I just brought this up and I'm going to emphasize this. Our own taxes make up the return, which is not enough to even offset the administrative costs of Social Security. The average salary of a Social Security administration, of a person who works in the Social Security Administration, is over $70,000 a year. There are people who regularly receive payrolls there of several $100,000 a year. Okay, there are thousands upon thousands of government bureaucrats who are under the Department of the Social Security Administration. So the administrative costs alone are too much to bear at this point. Okay, so there's really just, I hate being a bearer of bad news, but there really is no good news regarding Social Security from any front. It's all bad news. Okay, there's not one thing of this program that looks positive for anybody, especially someone who is not yet retired and who is looking to retire in the next 10 to 15 years. Okay, and here's the proof of the numbers. Okay, here is the amount of return for each dollar you pay in for Social Security since 1960. In 1960, okay, looked pretty good back then. In 1960, for every dollar you paid into Social Security, you were getting a return of $6.21 at retirement. Well, that's pretty good. That's excellent. I'd take that deal any day of the week if someone offered that to me on the street. But look what happened by 1980. That dollar dropped to $2.14. Now you're still getting a little more than double what you pay in. Again, that's not a terrible bet, okay? But by 2010, look what it's reduced to, 92 cents. So every dollar you put into Social Security, your return on that is only going to be 92 cents. And what you can see here is that the years are getting closer together. the changes are getting more dramatic as we go out. Okay, by 2030, which is only about 9 or 10 years away, it's estimated that the return for each dollar you put in is only going to be about 83 cents. Okay, so to depend on Social Security as your only source of retirement income is a magnificently huge mistake. Okay, if you're a young person watching this, just cross Social Security off your list. That's what you need to do, and you need to begin aggressively investing in your own retirement. Okay, pension plans aren't nearly as big as they used to be either. Companies can't afford pension plans anymore. About the only place now that you see pension plans is with state government workers, state government, federal workers. So really, we are looking at Social Security with a very, very dim view because it's just collapsing before our eyes. The numbers prove it. The changes they've had, the dramatic changes they've had to make to it since 1935 are just mind-boggling. And the fact that even from day one, it was really set up to fail. Here we are nearly 100 years later, and it's just an absolute debacle. Okay, so enough of the bad news. So where do we go from here? Okay, where do you go from here? What are you going to do? Well, you've got two choices. Okay, you have two choices. You can maintain the status quo. Okay, and a lot of people want to stick their head in the sand, and they just want to act like the government's going to rescue it and everything's going to be fine. Okay, you can go ahead and try to depend on Social Security. Okay, just keep going down your current path and depend on Social Security to be the bulk of your income. But when the system crashes, and eventually something will happen that will cause it to crash, what are you going to do at that time? Okay, you can sit around and hope that the government is going to rescue the program, but with $20 trillion in debt for the U.S. government and Social Security already being underfunded, we're in a terrible, terrible, terrible predicament. Okay, so you've got to take control of your retirement and really assure that you are able to create for yourself a lifetime income, because Social Security is supposed to pay for the rest of your life. Again, the government thought that most people wouldn't even make it to age 65. And not only now are we making it to age 65, half of us are going to make it to age 90. Okay? And Social Security is supposed to pay out for life. So you need to have a complementary strategy to help offset Social Security and where that fund is currently going. Okay? You need to start considering new strategies. Okay? You need to look for another area where you can provide a lifetime guaranteed source of income in case Social Security is not there for you in 5, 10, or 15 years, or if it's greatly reduced again in the amount that it's paying out. And the best way to provide a new source of guaranteed lifetime income is really through considering annuities as being part of your retirement strategy, because annuities pay a guaranteed lifetime income. Okay? And you've also got to look at accumulating wealth at a higher return. With Social Security only paying out, 85 to 90 cents for every dollar you put into it, that's a losing proposition. You would never take that kind of a bet from a private investor any day of the week. If someone came to you and said, hey, buy into our investment strategy, for every dollar you put in, we're going to give you 95 cents back. No one's going to take that deal. No one would. So what you need to do is you need to reduce that dependence on Social Security and create new income streams for yourself to generate and accumulate wealth at a higher rate of return than anything Social Security could ever pay you. Okay? You need to reduce your dependence on Social Security, and you need to really kind of lay out your future as if potentially Social Security won't be there. If it is there, and miraculously there is a cure and a solution to solve it, then so be it. There's a lot of infighting right now between the political parties as to whether or not Social Security should be privatized. I think privatization of Social Security is a great, great move. The way that would work, quite simply, is the government continues to collect it as a tax. So you would continue to see it being taken out of your paycheck, and the employer would continue to make contributions as well. The difference is this. you would have your own account online that you could log into, and you could change your investment strategy the same way you change your IRA, or the same way you change the investment strategy on your company-sponsored 401k plans. So it just gives people the alternative to be able to make their own decisions. Okay. Also, annuities provide a death benefit and long-term care options. Okay. So there are some people say, well, Social Security pays a death benefit. Yes, that benefit is about $250. But with the average cost of a funeral today being about $10,000, that doesn't even pay for, the gas to get the hearse to the cemetery. Okay. So annuities provide additional benefits that go beyond the ability of the lifetime generated income. There are other options there regarding death benefits, long-term care options, terminal illness diagnosis. Annuities are exempt from Medicare means testing as well. That's a whole nother topic that we'll get into in another webinar. So really what you need to do is you really need to start considering how an annuity needs to become an integral and very critical part of your retirement plan to potentially offset the shortfalls that we are going to continue to see in Social Security. So that's about it. Again, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but everything we've reported on this, these are all based on facts, and it's based on the history of the program since the beginning in 1935 to where we are today. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you. And again, hit the contact button at the top or the chat box, and we look forward to speaking with you and starting a conversation. Thanks.